Hello everyone, my name is George Hamner. Here we are at the beginning of 2012, and even though the Mayans did not say it was going to be the end of the world, a lot of people do worry that it's going to be the end of a major era. And particularly in our wonderful country, a lot of people are worrying that this is a very critical year for America with the elections of a lifetime this fall and so forth. You might say, take our country back from whom? And I hope to answer that in this presentation. Several months ago, I attended a seminar about UN Agenda 21, which we'll touch on briefly in this presentation. And a couple of people tried to ask the question, well, why is all this bad stuff happening? And I tried to ask it in, like, somebody is either gaining a lot of power or making a lot of money from all this nonsense. And I won't say that the instructor couldn't answer, but he certainly didn't. But it got me thinking, and in a sense, this presentation attempts to answer that question. So at the end of the presentation, I have sort of some action items that we all need to be thinking about, and this one is mine. This narrated, at least hopefully voiced over set of slides that I've put together is going to be my contribution to trying to help people understand and wake up to what we need to do next. In any presentation or lecture, you need to know a little bit about who's giving you this information and what credentials they bring to it or why they would be doing this. So just a little bit about my background. I feel like that I had a wonderful sampler of lots of different experiences that help gain a perspective that I hope will show up in trying to bring the points that are in this set of slides here. Grew up in the Deep South. My degree from the University of Alabama was physics and math. I took this fine degree and joined the United States Army. Spent almost 5 years on active duty, including fighting in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne. Got out of the Army and spent some time with the Giant Corporation, and then got involved in a high-tech startup funded of all things by the Rothschild Venture Capital Group. I actually met Baron Philippe's son. But anyway, worked for some smaller companies, and at the end of my career, back at my alma mater in a research institute. So quite a smorgasbord of experiences that hopefully gave me some perspective that'll show up in this presentation. Okay, here we go. We're going to start with some very basics. You might say the most utter basic question in the world is why on earth are these two-legged creatures that we call humankind, why are we even here to start with? And we'll talk about how America is truly different. I mean, there's a book called The 5,000-Year Leap that except perhaps for some of the early Israeli tribes and a little bit of the Anglo-Saxons, our country is different, and it's important, and we hope to understand that. So what happened along the way? How did we end up with what many people feel like is a true crisis? Then we'll talk a little bit about what is going on now, and then but why is there hope? The answer to that might surprise you to some degree, and then last of all, like I mentioned a while ago, sort of action steps. Was okay. So we understand this. What should we do about it? So that's the outline. We're going to start with the absolute utter basics, and this expression here is something I ran across years ago, and I've seen it in different ways, but it is in some ways the most profound point of departure in understanding what's going on. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience, not the other way around. It is said that the humans were created in the image of God, Now, what does this mean? I think it incorporates two very fundamental things. We, of all of the creatures of this earth, are the only ones that have true free will. That it is our responsibility to perform actions with the knowledge of good and evil. And then, secondly, we are co-creators, and we use our reason to co-create. If you think about it, I mean, a frog has been pretty much doing what they've been doing for a million years. But we humans, we're not even doing the same thing that we were doing 10 years ago. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I mean, the internet blossomed, in just recent years. So those are the two things that make us stand out from the other creatures. So, if we are spiritual beings, why are we here on the earth in the dense confines of this existence? Well, God gave us this beautiful planet for the perfection of the human soul. If the human soul lives forever, then governments or states or nations shrink to insignificance by comparison. Now ponder that as you consider the sovereignty of the individual versus the group. It's obvious that the planet operates by a set of natural laws. One might say that they're God's laws. And on the earth is that we humans use our reason to try to discover these laws. John Locke was one of the great thinkers and writers at the time of the founding of America, and he wrote about natural law. He says, that law teaches all mankind who will but consult it, that being equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, liberty, health, or possessions. Sounds pretty much like an articulate expression of the Golden Rule. Given Locke's natural law, the question becomes, can the people govern themselves? And one might say that, yes, of course, people can govern themselves if they follow natural law, and that you might even say that you're letting God's law govern. For thousands of years, people have just accepted the fact that power flows from God to the king. The divine right of kings, and the king could pretty much do whatever he wanted to. Well, probably among the most basic founding principles of America was they turned that around and said, no, that's not correct. Power flows from God to the people. Power does flow from God to the people, and people are born free and equal. They still can choose to give limited power to a government in order to achieve mutual benefits. I mean, the most obvious example is that you must have a military to protect life and liberty. If these natural laws that give us these natural rights, then people must come together and fund a military in order to protect them. So what did we do? First off, we declared our independence from the world's most powerful empire at the time, and then we wrote a constitution to embody the natural law that we've been talking about. And it took us 2 tries to get it right, as most everyone who knows American history knows, that the first attempt was called the Articles of Confederation, and they were too close to anarchy. If you look at the scale on this slide here, the people talk about the left and the right and whatever. The actual dichotomy is between too much government is called ruler's law. It ends up in tyranny. And no government, no law at all, which is anarchy. Well, the first attempt was too close to the right-hand side of the scale, and did not give enough power to the government. So they sat down again and wrote the U.S. Constitution, which is the closest that humankind has come to writing down God's law. The concept embodied in this wonderful document, which, by the way, is very brief, and there are many pocket constitutions available that everyone should have and keep handy. It's called a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. It actually is much more subtle than you think about. It has nothing to do with indirectly elected representatives, but it revolves around the fact that sovereignty resides in the individual, and her inalienable rights are protected even from the majority. So therefore, in our country, we pledge allegiance to the republic, and officials take an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As I learned more about this stuff and met some wonderful people that taught me some of this, one of the things I discovered is that my own state's constitution, which is now 100 years old and has some problems too, but has a wonderful description of rights and the role of government. So look at this. This is one state that I'm most proud to be from, that says the objective of government, that the sole object and only legitimate end of government is to protect the citizen in the enjoyment of life, liberty, and property. And when the government assumes other functions, it is usurpation and oppression. Very well stated, Alabama, 100 years ago. So what happened? We had the courage to break away from the world's most powerful empire. We wrote a constitution and a system to govern ourselves that comes the closest to God's law that humankind has yet produced. Some might argue that it's kind of a natural cycle, is that we had the courage to produce this liberty for ourselves, and it worked so well that this liberty produced much abundance for the 200 years that we've been working on this. Unfortunately, you would argue that abundance, life is too easy, produces selfishness and apathy. From apathy, we go back to dependency, and then from dependency back to bondage. Well, so some people would argue that it's a natural cycle. I think, and we'll talk as we go through this about what we can do to make sure that this natural cycle doesn't happen. But what happens is that the country was so successful that people tend to vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. And that very well endowed public treasury brings us to the point of banks. I think it's the famous expression was that Willie Sutton, the bank robber of what was 1920s and 30s, they said, well, why do you rob banks? He said, well, because that's where the money is. Well, a concept of central banking goes all the way back to 1694, the Bank of England, where a country turns over the creation of money to a private banking system, and it's called fiat money. We have a video in the next slide that does a marvelous job of explaining that. Anyway, dates all the way from 1694. At the beginning of our country, we dabbled in it from 1781 to 1836. And then from the time of Andrew Jackson all the way up to Woodrow Wilson, we had no central bank. And then the Fed, the infamous Fed, was created in 1913. By the way, along with the federal income tax to feed it. But anyway, what this does, first off, it allows nations to wage war on credit. Poor old Napoleon, he basically ran out of gold coins, but Wellington never ran out of British banknotes. It also allows politicians to spend without raising taxes. I sometimes say that central banking is the greatest narcotic known to humankind. And most of all, this private banking cartel that is chartered to do the money creation, they make lots of money with money that they do not own and did not earn.
Since 1971, when President Nixon took the United States off what was left of the gold standard, the world has operated under a system of money called fiat. The dollar, the pound, the euro are all government fiat currencies. Fiat is a Latin word meaning let it be so. It is the law that this government currency be money. Indeed, without that legal enforcement, and the fact that we must pay taxes in this money, that dollar bill or that computer digit that represents a dollar would be pretty much meaningless. Only the government has the power to issue fiat money, but banks can create it through lending. If somebody wants to borrow $10, a bank can create it from nowhere and lend it. It can then charge interest. Banks also create money by lending against an asset, such as a house. They're given the deeds to the house, and they create the money out of nowhere and lend it, at interest of course. Over the last 40 years, since this fiat system of money became the global norm, the supply of money has grown exponentially. In fact, we've seen the greatest growth in the supply of money in history. But who benefits? Of course, those that have the power to issue money, governments and banks. They haven't had to do anything productive, they just create money. Then those companies and individuals that get this money early. They can spend it before the prices of the things they want to buy have risen to reflect the new money in circulation. In other words, they get services, products, assets cheap. But prices soon rise, so holders of assets such as shares or houses will then see gains, without there necessarily being any improvements to the company or house in question. Often, this can lead to speculative bubbles. Who gets this money early? However money is created, be it through lending, fractional reserve banking, financial bailouts, or old-fashioned money printing, banks are always at or near the top of the money-issuing pyramid. Next come corporations who borrow large sums. Those on lucrative government contracts for new ventures, particularly overseas. Banks' associate companies and partners. Those that borrow early and at low rates. And the bank's senior employees. They all quickly get their share of the pie. In some cases, this will come in the form of bonuses. But what about those at the bottom of the pyramid? Those on fixed wages or incomes? Those who live in remote areas? Or those with savings? By the time this newly created money has filtered down to them, the prices of the things they want to buy have increased. Their savings buy them less, however, and their wages remain largely unchanged. In some cases, they have to take on debt just to be able to afford the things they were previously able to buy, which means they have to go back to the banks. In reality, this process of creating money only redistributes wealth from the bottom to the top of the pyramid, and thus that ever-increasing gulf between rich and poor gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
And I love this quote from Thomas Jefferson, and to me it's just amazing that these guys that founded our country, they knew all this stuff. He said back then, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to issue their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, The banks and the corporations that grow up around the bank will deprive the people of all property until the people wake up homeless on the continent that their fathers conquered. I have come to believe that this is not an economic theory issue, this issue of fiat money and central banking, but it is in fact a moral issue, because today many rewards to people are the result of immoral acts, maybe not illegal in all cases, but certainly immoral, and not honesty in business. A stable society requires sound principles. A moral society requires sound money, and today our country has neither. Okay, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and start getting at the question of take our country back from whom. In fact, the first reference book in the last slide that you'll see for further study does the best job. Most people sort of stay away from that. But anyway, like we say here, from the beginning of recorded time, there are a group of people who believe themselves to be an absolute elite, I mean maybe even gods. And today there exists a shadowy group of people who believe conspire to rule the world through a new world order. And if your ambition was to rule the world, what would you exercise as the levers of power? Well, obviously, money. I mean, this is like the new golden rule is that he who has the gold rules. But then the huge corporations that are really stateless, transnational corporations that exercise so much economic power and control. The media. In the United States, many people feel like it's been controlled for over 100 years. So the general public has no choice in how they learn. Education, again, that people feel like that in our country, education has been slowly brought under control of the bad guys, so that in public education today, and in higher education particularly, you learn what they want you to learn. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, but the environment has been exploited to serve the ends of these folks, and now with Obamacare in our country, even our health is going to be under the ability to lever the situation from these folks. While we're talking about the levers of power, you need to understand that war is different. War is the only exception where we're willing to give up some of our individual freedom for survival, for obvious reasons. So therefore, the bad guys need continual war. After the second of the global wars, after World War II, they invented the Cold War to keep things going, and then after the Soviet Empire collapsed, they had to invent the War on Terror. And even on a more benign way, we have war on poverty, war on drugs. War is different. So who are the bad guys? Like I said earlier, most people tend to stay away from this. It makes you worry sometimes. And I might note again that Gonzalez's book, the first one in the reading list on the last slide, does the absolute best job of explaining this. But they are found exactly where you would expect, exactly what you've heard in the particularly in the giant financial corporations, the major transnational corporations, and just like President Eisenhower warned, of what was it, 1960 or so, the military-industrial complex, academia. They love to hide in the comforting halls of academia, and of course in government. These people belong to these various organizations. I guess ever since Cecil Rhodes and his round table from the late 1800s, the CFR was created in the 1920s, and then the various groups, Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergs, the UN itself, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, World Churches Organization, World Health Organization. A lot of these world-oriented things have been totally infiltrated. So this just exactly like you would expect. This is exactly the type of organizations where you find the bad guys. So how do you recognize these people? I think that this is a great list of their characteristics. It's also interesting that how do they find each other? Through their various organizations, they bring them up, and then once they recognize that they have the right characteristics, and they bring them closer and closer to the inner circle. It's interesting. Years ago, a friend of mine said, if you're very smart and very capable and have no scruples, you certainly can go a long way, but you'll become a truly dangerous person. And it's also interesting, if you believe yourself to be a god and that you answer to no one, it's easy to be outwardly charming because you don't have to worry about what anybody thinks about you except your own intoxicated ego. So if you want to rule the world, you have to have more and more bigger government. It's interesting if you think about government, what that basically is coercive power. That's why you want to give to government the absolutely minimum set of capabilities to get the job done. The government that governs best is one that governs least, but that's exactly the opposite. So the bad guys need a bigger government so they can save the planet from the rest of us. And they love to use words like more equal economic order. What this actually means is equality and poverty for most of us, and then unlimited richness and power for the dominant elite. But it never works out exactly like they think. The bad guys think that they're going to end up, ruling the world, but it doesn't work out that way. What happens is one absolutely ruthless, tyrannical person, the strongest one, evolves out of the takeover scenario, and then what does that person do? He turns around and kills off all the capable people that helped him get there, so there would never be a challenge to that. I mean, just look at what happened with Hitler and the Night of the Long Knives, and Stalin, who murdered so many people, and Mao, who was probably the greatest murderer that's ever lived on the planet. It won't work out as they think it will. Of all the levers of power infiltrated by these bad guys in their New World Order, the environmental movement is the most insidious, particularly in the outdoor-oriented Deep South. We love our Earth, this beautiful planet that God gave us to develop our souls. So it's very easy to be co-opted into thinking that we're saving this Earth, and in fact we're serving the New World Order. And as I mentioned in the very beginning of this presentation, the UN Agenda 21 is at the heart of the evil, and it is so gratifying that only a few days ago the Republican National Committee, I guess is what you call it, issued a resolution signed, particularly we're proud that one of the authors and signers was the representative from Alabama, where they are going on record opposing UN Agenda 21. So anyway, the environmental movement, while it sounds great, have been co-opted to serve evil ends. As the globalist elite exercise all their levers of power in order to try to create this new world order of theirs, they have one big problem. Unfortunately, our country, America, stands in their way. the freedom and the rights embodied in our Constitution are a real problem for them. Like I said in the beginning, we're different, and it's a problem. And they have been working for over 100 years to try to weaken our country in every respect. That you could just look around. They've tried to, dope us up, dumb us down, and make us dependent, so that we will easily be molded into supporting their plans. But even though these guys are really smart, they've been working on this for a long time, there's definitely hope. The internet is a different new revolutionary tool that we'll devote one whole slide to next. And then, like I said, that this presentation is my contribution in trying to wake America up, and it's happening everywhere. You just see, thank goodness for the internet and what people are starting to call the alternative media, alternative to mainstream media. Everyone is waking up, and this is my attempt to help that. The other thing too we'll talk about, the bad guys are cowards, and then most important of all, the basic strength of our constitutional republic is timeless. I've said for years that the internet is on a par with the invention of the printing press by Gutenberg in 1448, which many people think ushered in the revolution, the Reformation, both in some ways in a religious sense and certainly in the blossoming of modern science. That before people they didn't have the tool to learn unless they went to the church and and listened to someone tell them, because the books were hand copied books were just too expensive. So what we have with the internet is incredible worldwide power, is the equivalent of that invention. Now, unlike the mainstream media, it cannot be controlled yet. In fact, it's interesting. As I've been working on these slides, there were two bills. I guess the House version, SOPA, supposedly anti-piracy, were actually the first attempt at trying to control the internet. And thank goodness that there were enough techies out there that scared the Congress into at least putting this on the shelf for now. I mean, who knows? It will be back, but as long as the internet is out there, thank goodness we have that, because it is the major tool to wake up the American people. Now here's a reason for hope that I'll bet you've never thought of. Most of these bad guys are actually physical cowards. They never serve in their continual wars. And if you think about it, totalitarian takeovers are usually accomplished by a few well-armed people against an unarmed population. Thank God for the Second Amendment. It will never happen here. In fact, I should have looked up the exact statistics, but if you look at the number of armed hunters in the field, in even just the large Midwestern states in the fall, it's the equivalent of the largest land army in the world. And I just firmly believe if we allow America to be controlled by these globalist New World Order conspirators, it will be the first time in history that a few unarmed cowards subdued an armed and, I might say, veteran population. Along with our armed population, these are our basic strengths and the reason, the fundamental foundation about why there's hope. If you think about it, we lament sometimes that we have a hard time getting a coordinated voice, but if you look at the Patriot Tea Party, if you want to call it that, the Liberty Movement, Campaign for Liberty, the Oath Keepers, this whole common freedom and liberty movement is too fragmented to be infiltrated or to buy off. So if you think about it, your in this case your weaknesses become your strength. And then the most fundamental of all, our constitutional republic is as close as humankind has yet produced a governing structure that allows people to pursue God's purpose. Okay, so let me try to summarize. We've talked about the most basic of all questions is what are we two-legged creatures doing here on this beautiful planet, and hopefully we've given some insight into that. And then maybe the centerpiece of the whole purpose of this presentation about why America is different, and who are these bad guys that want to rule the world, and why it is that our country stands in their way. So let's understanding all that, let's look at a few action steps that what all of us need to do in one way or the other. Okay. Here's my attempt at putting together a set of action steps. Obviously, it starts with educating yourself and then trying to encourage your family and friends to do the same thing. And the very last slide is a reading list of what I believe is a very good place to start. Join one or more of the liberty organizations, whether it's Tea Party Patriots, Campaign for Liberty, Oath Keepers, or whatever. Join, contribute, and support. Get a pocket constitution and keep it handy. It's a comfort to see that the foundation of how to run our country fits in the palm of your hand. Obviously, research candidates and only vote for those that truly believe in their oath, and that's becoming more and more difficult to do because the liberty movement has become so popular that you see candidates are now seizing the various ideas and mouthing that they support them. So be careful. We're not going to get through this without some rough bumps. So as best you can, prepare for hard times, and there are all sorts of philosophies about that. But you need to think about it, and then decide what your role is. And like I said, this putting together these slides is my attempt to educate and wake up. So look over this great quote. As Cicero was worrying about the fate of Rome half a century before the birth of Christ. It's a great quote. But in actuality, I believe that we have learned, and that it's going to be our country's finest hour. So look at this quote, and then you'll see in the next slide a film clip from the Apollo 13 movie that I think is just one of the greatest expressions of what we're going to do next.
Copy that.
Is the typhoon still present in this blast hole now?
Yeah.
We got the parachute situation, the heat shield, the angular trajectory, and the typhoon. There's just so many variables. I'm a little
I know what
lost.
the problems are, Henry. This could be the worst disaster NASA's ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.